Hi, my name is Javier Del Rosario. I'm a senior and this is my final Ways of Knowing project. Today I will be talking about an experience that I've gone through multiple times and has been very impactful in my life.
Why did you choose this example?
These experiences were life-changing and had large impacts on the way I viewed things and people.
Can you tell me the details?
I would love to. After a fantastic 4 years in Singapore and a wonderful freshman year at SAS, I was forced to move to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My friends in Singapore were the people I grew up with, and having to leave them made me so angry. I lost respect for my parents who forced me to move and changed my extrovert attitude to one that was very solitary.
Tell me about the moving process.
I was very angry the whole time. I would not talk to my parents and leave the house whenever I could. I was also very uncooperative in an attempt to allow me to stay in Singapore. I was very negative and critical of KL when we arrived.
What happened in your first year at KL?
I was very solitary and unfriendly in my first weeks at ISKL. I will explain it more, but as the year went on, I actually made the best of friends and had great memories that caused me to love it.
So it sounds like your emotions got the better of you. Are you going to talk about that way of knowing?
Absolutely, emotion played a huge role in my move. I would also like to talk about a change in perception and my mind map on the topic of moving.
So for our audience, we should briefly explain that ways of knowing govern all the knowledge that we take in and create. They are reason, perception, emotion, and language.
Correct. I will look at the emotion and perception ways of knowing, while also talking about my personal mind map.
Obviously, you would have wanted to stay with your friends in Singapore, but is there anything you could have done to make the move easier?
Well, I want to know to what extent can emotions and perception affect the difficulty of life-changing decisions.
Well, what do you mean by difficulty?
Well, say I'm making a decision which affects my life and the life of others, and I also had bad experiences with these decisions in the past. Obviously, it would be more difficult to make one without any external or internal factors affecting it.
I see, and that your decision you are talking about is moving, right?
Yes.
Okay, now tell me about these emotions and how they work.
So emotions are strong feelings deriving from one's situation, circumstances, feelings, and mood.
So, how do emotions work?
Everyone has emotions, and everyone can feel all types of emotions: fear, sadness, joy, and anger. The thing about these emotions are they are only experienced when some sort of stimulus causes them to be expressed. The James Lang theory states all emotions are derived from the presence of a stimulus.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, this is how it works. It starts with a stimulus, which leads to physiological reaction, then to a corresponding emotion, and then finally to awareness. So if I was to receive an F on my final exam, which is the stimulus, I would smack the table and then feel emotions such as anger and fear. I would be aware of my anger and realize that I did badly on the exam, and possibly find ways to do better on the next one.
Oh, I see now.
Damasio also explains that memories and other stimuli that aren't necessarily physical can cause emotions. Memories can have a significant effect on emotions as well.
So, how does this James Lang theory and Damasio involve your moving to KL situation?
My situation back in 10th grade deals with emotions a lot and actually fits these theories very well.
How so? Tell me about it.
Well, I experienced extreme anger and even depression because of the move. I experienced an external stimuli, which was my parents telling me that I'm moving. After the stimuli, I felt these powerful emotions, which fits the James Lang theory. As for Damasio, memories can affect emotions. For example, I remember the pain of moving to Jakarta when I was younger, so these emotions arise again when I realized that I had to move again.
You are right.
Yes, had there been no stimuli or memories, there would have been no need for me to be angry and depressed.
That's right. These theories fit perfectly in this.
The James Lang theory and the James Lang and Damasio theory worked well, but there's another factor of emotions called emotional coloring that also played a role. It is similar to Damasio.
What is emotional coloring?
It refers to how the effect of emotions on it refers to how the effects of emotions on our perception of certain things.
How does it relate to your situation?
Well, before having to move away from Singapore, I had to move to Singapore. 4 years before, I left Jakarta for Singapore, and I was extremely angry towards the concept of moving. I colored the concept of moving with the emotion of anger. So when I was told I was moving again, the emotion of anger and rage colored my perception of moving, making me very angry.
Oh, I see.
Yes, but now I will talk about the change I experienced and how I regulated emotion while I moved away.
So, relating to your knowledge issue, how different would the move have been if you could have controlled your emotions?
It would have been much easier. If I was able to control my anger, I would have I would have had a more positive mindset, making moving, which was about moving, which would ultimately make it easier.
Did you experience a change in emotions after this move?
Yes, I did. I actually went through a huge realization. After I moved to KL and started enjoying myself, I realized that the only reason moving was hard was because I made it hard. My emotions were still very high, but the second they went down. But the second they went down, I started having a good time. It led me to conclude that emotions were causing me to have a hard time adjusting.
So, you realize that moving can be easy if you don't let your emotions get the better of you?
Yes, I realized that emotions were a choice in my situation, and that all I had to do was move on from my anger. This realization actually helped me in the future, in a future situation, and will continue to help me.
Interesting. So now you know how to regulate your emotions to help you. But what about your perception? How did that affect your move?
People have different perceptions on different things. These relates to stereotypes and different biases. For example, some people have perception that America is the richest country where everyone is wealthy. However, this is a silly stereotype and a bias because of exposure to materials such as the media has led to this perception.
So sum up how perception works.
Well, perception can be heavily affected by past experiences and exposure to certain things. If I always see African Americans being arrested on the news, I can build a perception or stereotype that African Americans are violent.
I see. So perception can really affect a person's view on certain things.
Yes, things like rapid cognition, thin slicing, and bias all relate to perception and all relate to my experience with moving.
That's cool. Want to explain what those things are?
Sure, let's start with rapid cognition. Rapid cognition is an instant thought or reaction to something based on past experiences. Like the African American example I just used, I might have been exposed to news like that, and when I see an African American man on the street, I immediately think he's violent or dangerous.
I see. Well, what about thin slicing?
Thin slicing is a part of rapid cognition. It's the ability people have to make an assumption about a person or thing based on a small window of experience.
And then what about bias? Can you explain that?
Well, bias is a prejudice in favor or against something. Perception can create a bias on certain things. For example, an article on the war in Iraq may be filled with positives and benefits in an American magazine. This is because it's glorifying its own country. However, a magazine in a country like Afghanistan would be more negative, showing how American troops are actually maybe hurting civilians.
That's a great example. How do these things relate to your experience?
Well, in my case, my perception of moving was already damaged due to previous experience. I already briefly touched on this when I spoke about emotional coloring.
Yes, I can see. So how do they relate to your parts of perception, such as rapid cognition and thin slicing?
Well, first of all, I had the painful memories of moving, so the instant my parents uttered, "We're moving," rapid cognition occurred in my mind, and I immediately made the assumption that moving would be terrible and difficult again.
That makes perfect sense.
My past experiences with moving also created a bias around the whole subject. My previous move was filled with pain and anger. It created a bias about the topic of moving, making me believe that moving would be so tough once again.
I understand you.
Rapid cognition and bias caused my perception of moving to be very negative. But like my emotions, I experienced a change throughout the move.
Good, so explain the change.
Well, like emotions, perception is something that can be controlled. Memories and past experiences may be brought up, creating a perception on certain things. However, they can be ignored or learned from in order to lower the difficulty of life-changing decisions.
Okay, so sum that up.
Well, the life-changing decision that affected me was moving, obviously. And my perception of moving was negative due to past experiences. However, I was able to regulate my perception of moving once again, once I realized that my previous move led me to amazing experiences. I realized that if I didn't let my past experiences influence my mental map so much, then I wouldn't have made this move so difficult. It was my perception that raised the difficulty, but once again, I regulated it, and it became easier.
I think this was a very important change for you to go through. Now you have this ability to disregard negative perceptions, which could harden other life-changing decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so in conclusion, you have answered your own knowledge issue, right?
Yes, I know that emotion and perception can definitely play a role in life-changing decisions, for the better or worse. I've reached the conclusion that an awareness of the effect of negative emotion and perception are very important in lowering the difficulty of life-changing decisions.
That's fantastic.
After this move, I now know that if I ever have to experience and go through a life-changing decision again, such as leaving my family for college or having to experience death, I need to